Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Council Chambers, and welcome to our Governments and Priorities agenda for September 8th. Administration, anything to add to the agenda?
No, Your Worship, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor, for the adoption, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I move that Town Council adopt the agenda as presented.
Okay, thank you much. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that is carried. And moving on is the public input session. Talent manager, has anybody registered to provide feedback and comments to council on this public input session?
No, Your Worship.
Thank you. With that, we're moving on to presentations and delegations. And today, we are blessed to have Inspector Loken with us to provide a quarterly report of the RCMP. Welcome to Chambers, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. And again, the mics are very bad, so if I can get you to pull the mic a little closer.
And do I have to push the button to
You do
engage
have to
it?
push the button. Nope.
No, it's good.
That's good. If
Is
you want
it on?
stats, it's the other button for.
Is it on? It's on? Okay.
Welcome, sir, and go ahead.
Yeah, I have a few things here to speak about. Once again, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to come in and to a council that is supportive of us. So, I mean, it's good to see, especially in today's climate, that we do have the support. Mostly, of course, we can have ongoing discussions about various topics, but overall, and the public has shown support for us as well. So that's very good and means a lot to the people that are working in the detachment. Insofar as statistics, forgive me because my arms aren't quite long enough and I forgot my glasses at home today, but so I'm going to be struggling here. But overall, statistics-wise, January to August, so I just got these this morning, and so they take us from January 1st until August 31st of this year. We did see, under persons crimes, a 6% decrease in persons crimes overall from this time last year. Compared to 2016, they do a capture of 2016 to 2020, we saw an 11% increase. So, but over last year, because we did have a bit of a spike, and then since last year, on persons crimes, we've come down 6%. Now, assaults overall have dropped 4%. And if we're talking month to month, because those stats that I just said were January to August, strictly the month of August compared to last year, we saw a 5% decrease, August to August. And the one concerning statistic on the person's crimes, August to August, last year versus this year, is a 63% increase in assaults. And I think we did have a discussion about that today. We have had some people that have put off reporting some crimes because we can assume COVID. We can also assume because people were isolating at home. There wasn't the contact that they typically have with other people where they go out and have interactions with friends and family who might encourage them or ask them to come forward. So overall, like I said, that statistic is somewhat concerning month to month, but overall we're still 6% less overall for the year than we were last year. Now, in terms of property crime, January to August, we are 5% less than we were last year for the same time period. And just month to month, August of 19 versus August 2020, we are 37% down in property crime from August of last year. Now, the two items that I am looking at is last year versus this year, break-and enters were down 60%, August to August, last year versus this year. And overall, if we take in the entire year, which is better to take a longer period of time. It provides, I think, more of an accurate picture, is the break and enters for January to August. This year versus last year, there's a 6% increase, which when you look at the actual numbers is 50 versus 53. So it's pretty much the same when it's, you know, a high number like that and it's only 3 difference. So, and then the biggest concern in those statistics, like I said, overall property crime is down 5%, but theft of motor vehicle, January to August, has increased 36%. And again, I have my opinions on why that took place, partially because of COVID, partially because of the rotation that we have of our prolific offenders that go to jail, serve their sentence, come out. We focus attention on them again, and it happened that in that time period that some of our very prolific offenders, I'm not going to name them publicly, but they were out, and some they were caught for, some we think they were probably responsible for, but they're back in custody now, and I would expect that we'll see a decline now in the coming months because it comes and goes. Now, because of COVID, not only we changed some of our operations, the judicial system changed theirs, corrections changed theirs. We did see a lot of people get released that potentially wouldn't be out otherwise. And then also with the new Bill C-75, we've seen a focus mainly on persons crimes. Property crimes aren't typically getting the custody that we would have experienced in, say, last year or even the years before. That's really changed things in terms of property crime. So as far as statistics, there may be some questions, but that's about all I'll say about those. Now, in discussions with Carl, he said that there has been some discussion about, from some residents and in online activity, about our presence in the community. And as we did anticipate, with the detachment moving to Spruce Grove, Stony Plain is no longer kind of the center of activity for the comings and goings of the police cars. So it's somewhat to be expected that you wouldn't see the police cars coming and going as often. But I can assure you that Stony Plain is part of our patrol plans that we do have, and particularly during COVID, in an effort to have the members out of the office. I won't go into great detail of the plans that we had for COVID, but there was more of a focus on the members doing their paperwork and getting caught up on files, not in the detachment. On certain shifts and other shifts, they were encouraged to go out of the detachment. It was to reduce the numbers in the detachment at any given time, and other times the members would be going out of the detachment and expected to be on the road pretty much their whole shift unless they had to come back for something. So we did see an increase in patrols, and we did focus their activities in the hotspots that we were seeing identified by the analyst and identified by any citizen that would call in. Anytime somebody calls in and speaks to any of the members, what happens is the member who takes the call will send out a detachment-wide email saying that there is a concern about this certain area of Stony Plain. This person is experiencing, suspicious activity, or there's a white truck that's hanging around, or there's speeders in this area. Whatever the concern is, that's sent out detachment-wide, and everybody kind of focuses on that area in their patrols. So we have had an increased presence at the skate park because of some citizens' concerns bringing things forward. We did have a high-profile arrest. A person was arrested on a Canada-wide warrant at the skate park. So we have had some good success there with the members doing regular patrols there as well. And like I said, anytime anybody calls in, we do focus patrols on their areas of concern. In terms of COVID, I think I touched on it briefly before at our last online meeting. our specialized units were all sent back to general duty, and we developed a plan that would limit a number of regular members in the office at any given time. So part of the time they were working off-site on their paperwork and on files electronically, and the other time when they were in uniform and at the office, the expectation is that they would be out patrolling. And so some of these members we have a number of plainclothes or discrete vehicles. Some people call them undercover vehicles. They're not undercover, but they're regular looking vehicles. And so even though the presence is there, you might not see them because they look like any other car. Now, our front counter, as you probably were aware, was we never stopped service at the front counter, but we did limit front counter interaction in that when people came to the detachment, there was a sign with instructions on what people were to do, whether it was reporting online or whether calling a certain number from their own cell phone, or if they wanted, they could pick up the phone outside and somebody would come out to them and see what they wanted. Only in extreme cases, obviously if it was a serious incident or an emergent incident, obviously they were brought inside. But for the most part, things were dealt with in the parking lot and outside their vehicles, and they were given paperwork and took it home and brought it back and things like that. And we incorporated scanning and digital imaging, reporting online, forms that could be filled in via computer. So I think one of the upsides of COVID is it helped us to recognize some efficiencies that we could put into place, whereas previously in our world, sometimes it takes a long time to develop change, as Bruce would know, especially across our large organization. And we were able to incorporate some things that worked, that served the purpose, that still provided the service to the public. And I don't see us going back to the way that things used to be in some of those, and it's actually a very good thing for us. So our support staff, some of them were working from home. They were provided with computers, and they did a lot of work from home, and we were able to do a lot of work that we weren't getting done as far as updating SOPs and policies and things like that. And so in a sense, it did help us, but they were all working from home. I should say some of them were working from home, but they're all back to work now as of mid-June. They're all back. All of our support staff are back working 100%. And one of the good things about our new building that we moved into last September is if COVID had hit while we were in our old detachment where everybody was kind of stacked on top of each other, I don't know what we'd be doing. We'd be looking for other places to work out of, and some of our people might still be working from home too. So, but in the new detachment, we're able to physically distance from each other well enough. There were a couple people that we weren't able to do that with, and so we put up some plexiglass barriers. But for the most part, it's been, like I said, the new building couldn't have came at a better time. So, and then with the front counter, it's still, you come in and we have a person that meets them at the front door, finds out what exactly they're there for. If it's something that they can report online, or if it's just a simple form, they're sent back outside with it, and then they're basically triaged by that person, and they're sent to the front counter. We have 2 windows open, so that seems to be working well. And then because we typically have 4 people at the front counter, the other 2 positions we're using elsewhere to catch up on stuff. So. Then lastly, in terms of resourcing, I know that sometimes I come here and I say that we're short and we're working on it, and other times, you know, we're sitting very well. And right now, with the ebb and flow of resources, we're almost at high tide right now, which is a very good place to be. We've got 2 new sergeant positions. One started in July, one starts at the end of September. And those positions have been vacant for some time. It's just the process has taken some time, and especially with COVID and things that are beyond our control with other units in other provinces, the promotion process has been really slow and delayed. And so we've got 3 new corporals that have been identified. 2 of them are local constables that have worked here, and one is in Leduc, and she actually used to be here as a constable, so she knows the area, she knows the people, and so we've got 3 very good corporals. And just one last note that I want to add is that our detachment, and partially because of the new building, the location of the city, the good work that goes on, the good communities that we serve, is becoming, or has become, a very desired spot. And we have a lot of competition for our promotions now, which is a very good place to be because we have high quality people putting in for these jobs. And so sometimes it's a very tough decision on picking the best of the best. And so again, thank you for helping to make this a really good place to work. That's it for me.
Okay. Thank you very much for the update, Inspector Loken. I appreciate that, and it's great to hear some of the stats. It's interesting how kind of the stats have changed from August to August, so you're providing some details, and then versus January to August. It kind of gives you a different picture of what's kind of happening in the community, because I think you mentioned one that was break and enters were down by 6%, but overall it was up. So, you know, if somebody's looking at this one stat, it's kind of misleading, is what it is. So I'm glad that you provided us with a full update. Members of council, any questions of clarity and understanding to Inspector Loken? Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening. Thank you for coming. A couple of questions for you. So first of all, we're going to be addressing VLTs in our community. Again, they were here many years ago, and then the community decided to remove them from the community. And now, you know, many years later, we're looking at it again, and had a survey, and now looking at potentially other mechanisms just to get the feedback from the community. But I was wondering if you have some feedback as to, you have a community in Spruce Grove that does have VLTs, and we do not. Do you have any feedback for us as to, is it a good thing? Is there problems that we might incur having them here?
Mm-hmm. And VLTs, like the video lottery terminals.
Yes.
You know, you're a bit putting me on the spot because I've never pondered it too much, other than I guess with any type of gambling comes, you know, certain issues potentially when people don't manage gambling appropriately or responsibly. As far as specific things that would impact policing, not significantly. I mean, there is, I guess, a larger discussion on families where, you know, there's potential for someone to have an addiction to gambling, and where it leaves them economically, and where that puts the family in a lower socioeconomic class, food, fighting, arguments, things like that, potentially. But I would suggest that VLTs are very prolific throughout Alberta, and if they don't have them in Stony Plain, Spruce Grove is 5 minutes away. So I don't know if it would have a significant impact, but I haven't put a lot of thought into it.
Okay, thank you for that. I have another question. Thank you, Your Worship. Next question is regarding between Highway 628 going to Highway 779. I live in High Park, and there's quite a bit of racing that goes on that road. We have a nice little speed visual there that people can see how fast they're going. And so they, between the hours of like 7 or 8 at night and later, it's quite regular. What can we do about that in terms of our community? What would you suggest we do?
Well, with anything, like I said before, when somebody has a concern about whether it be speeding or some kind of increased activity in any place, I can certainly make a note and have members patrol in that area. We do have traffic members as well that work out of our building, and so whenever those emails are sent out detachment-wide, they receive them as well. And so although they're a provincial unit and they're based, their area isn't just our detachment area, their zone is much larger. It goes out, past Jasper, and they do everything. But this is the epicenter of their activity, and obviously if they're looking for something to do close to home, then they take note of our suggestions. So, I mean, I can certainly put that down on the list for the members to provide some extra patrols out in that area. But it almost sounds like the speed sign is almost like a competition to see.
It works very well for that, yeah, in that specific location, for sure.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll make a note of it.
Thank you.
Or I have made a note of it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Matties. Moving on to Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Inspector Larkin. I was really interested in the data that you provided, your statistics there, especially when it comes to from last April to this April, because I think a lot of them, in my opinion, are kind of skewered by COVID. And so specifically, I noticed that you said that personal assault was up by 63%.
Right, that's, let me find that. That's for the month of August, last year versus this year.
Okay, so do you think that, well, what I'm wondering specifically is about domestic abuse. It is, we hear that because of COVID, family situations are kind of unstable. Could you attribute some of that increase to domestic abuse?
Absolutely. And I mean, as far as actual domestic violence, charges of assault, I don't have that in front of me, but I do know that we, particularly after everything kind of locked down, beginning of April, end of March, and there, we did see an increase, especially when everybody was locked down tight at home. Everybody was scared. There was a lot of uncertainty. Businesses were laying people off. We did see increased activity in the terms of things that didn't necessarily result in charges, but complaints of disturbance from neighbors about their neighbors fighting, like a heated argument that we would get called to settle and maybe convince someone to stay somewhere else for the night or something like that. We did see an increase in that, and homes that we would not normally get called to. Something that we were just talking about today, that I was talking to with the domestic violence group that we have in the detachment, is they said it used to be unusual to see female offenders on the list of domestic violence in the charge category. And because they have a binder of the list of the files that they stay on top of and that they monitor. And it used to be unusual to see anyone on that list, and now they're seeing 6 or 7 on a page. And so they're seeing a shift to female offenders. And again, the discussion that we had is purely speculation at this point because they just brought it up today. But it is, I think with increased tension of people having to spend more time together than they typically do, not having the outlets that they typically do, whether it be the gym, the bar, fishing, golfing, going out with friends, or just visiting with your family or being at work and spending time apart. People are spending more time together, and some people are getting on other people's nerves. Sometimes that results in an argument, sometimes that results in physical violence. Yeah, so we're going to look into it more and look more at the details of it. It was just brought up today because the statistics that I have just came out this morning, and then went and talked to them about it. And so, but they did say that there was a shift to a lot more female offenders.
That's very interesting. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Another question. So it's not really your obligation to find out what we could do to decrease that family violence. But is there some resource that the community could use, FCSS could use, in order to try to accommodate or to lessen that pressure that's on families?
And again, I could talk to our domestic violence coordinators, I can never say it. They're the ones that could probably answer that question better than I could as to what resources they think that they would be able to utilize. Unfortunately, I would say a lot of times, we do have the resources. We did see the importance of domestic violence being taken seriously by the police. We did add, an extra position a couple of years ago to the domestic violence unit, so that we could focus our attention in that area to make sure that we're doing everything right as far as from a policing perspective. Unfortunately, a lot of times we're at the whim of a lot of external factors, and I think you're right, COVID has been a large external factor in not just domestic violence, but a lot of things, mental health and all kinds of things that are kind of changing our world right now. So I would expect that once, I don't know if we'll go back to normal, but once things settle down a bit and the world frees up a little more, I would expect that we see probably that relax a little bit. But obviously, just putting the message out there to people that the police are still there, that we're still there to help, that they can call. But as far as extra, let me talk to our domestic violence coordinators, and through Carl, I'll try and get an answer for you.
Thank you, thank you. And just to follow up on that, Mr. Mayor, sorry I'm taking so long. You mentioned the mental health. And so have you noticed calls coming up for people who have some mental health episodes that you're called in more to than usual?
And as far as anecdotally, it appeared that we were seeing a rise. And it seemed like, especially at the beginning, that we were seeing more suicides and that we were seeing more people that were threatening, more people that were reaching out for help. But then when we actually pulled the statistics, it didn't seem that the numbers would support that. And so I think COVID definitely did have an impact, and that some of the mental health issues that we and AHS has dealt with probably can be attributed to COVID and to the stressors involved in that. But I would suggest, like, now we're at a place where it's not a lot different than it has been in other years.
And one final thing, Mr. Mayor, thank you. And that is, what about your mental health and the mental health of our officers and our RCMP, our support systems in that? I know that, you hear a lot on the radio about defund the police and, all that kind of, that movement that's starting to happen. And I can only imagine what that must do to staff morale and to the officers that we employ in our regiment. Could you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And again, this is something that we do talk about at work. In the time that I've been in policing, I think, in 24 years, I haven't seen such negativity, not necessarily from the public at large, but certain groups that, when I say certain groups, I don't want to, I have to be really careful how I say this, but I don't want to specifically point my finger at social media or the media, but there's certainly more information and opinions that were available at any other time in our lives, I think. And so it's very easy to not just have the sourced factual story that would come out 10 years ago. Now there's a lot of opinion, there's a lot of experiences that people have had that some think represent all officers when it's a very, very small few. But that said, yeah, it has been tough on the members. That said, we've had a lot of people show their support as well, and so people have gone out of their way, either by phone calls or sending cards or just even on the street saying a word of support. And so that does go a long way with the membership. I'm not going to say that it doesn't weigh. We did have a loss here in the detachment a few weeks back that I really don't want to share publicly, but that has impacted us a lot. We do have really good benefits through the RCMP in terms of mental health, and we as a detachment are focusing on things that we can do above and beyond what the RCMP as an organization has provided. So I think we're going to set up a committee within the detachment itself to discuss these. We've got some very respected members that have had struggles throughout their career, but like I said, they're very well respected within the detachment. They're senior. And so part of that is, particularly with the young people, removing the stigma of coming forward and saying that you're not okay, or coming forward and not necessarily even saying that you're not okay, saying that it wouldn't hurt to go for a wellness check. It wouldn't hurt to go see a counselor, even if it's once a year, just as you would to go to the doctor to make sure that your body's okay. You go to make sure that your mind is okay, because sometimes you don't recognize it within yourself, and it takes somebody on the outside to point that out. But like I said, the RCMP has phenomenal benefits when it comes to these types of services, so we're really encouraging the members to take advantage of that. And then, and when I say the members, I should say that we also include the support staff in this as well. Their benefits are different than the regular members, but at the same time, we include them in all of our programs and initiatives, because they're there all the time. And sometimes it's tougher for them because they see and hear everything that's going on. They're the continuity, they're the people that are the glue in the detachment that stay there year after year, see members come and go, see tragedy happen, and they wear it as well. So, but yeah. I don't know if you have any other questions from
No, that's good. Thank you so much. Know that you are appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other questions from members of council? See none. Definitely thank you much for taking the time to present to us today and sharing those little updates. And as Deputy Mayor has mentioned, yes, please take care of your own mental health and also the members as well, because I think it's kind of hard to realize that yourself when you're actually in that mind space yourself. And like you mentioned, it's also good to have friends and family to actually kind of steer you in that way too. So definitely encourage your members and yourself to take that time that's necessary. Just a couple questions, just tying on to what Councillor Maddie said regarding speeding on Highway 628. I think as we start coming out of this pandemic, people have forgotten how to obey speed limit signs. I've received quite a few reports of speeding on Fairways Drive, Golf Course Road, and Veterans Boulevard. So if I can ask yourself and maybe to our general manager to add that onto their list of more patrols. And when you're talking to our ATE enforcement, maybe that's something that we step up for the next little while until we get people back into routine of driving according to the speed limits. You mentioned there's a little bit of outcry of the lack of exposure within town Stony Plain because obviously the physical location has moved out of the community into the city of Spruce Grove. My primary concern is response rates. So in terms of when there's a call in for service to the RCMP, do you track response rates?
We don't. Okay. I know the fire departments do, we don't.
Okay, because that might give our residents a little bit of security, knowing that if somebody calls and needs somebody, we have somebody here in a reasonable amount of time. If the answer is no,
I would suggest there's always somebody that's around. I mean, the city of Spruce Grove and the town of Stony Plain do pay for members, and although they're physically located in Spruce Grove, A lot of times, I think that they could get to places in Stony Plain faster than they could get to some areas of Spruce Grove just because of the open highway between. Now, other times there are members over here patrolling and in the community, so I think our response times are typically fairly quick, but we don't track them, no.
Thank you for that. And then another thing that I kind of keep my eye on is the crime severity index. You know, that doesn't matter how many officers you have. I look at that because that tells you what kind of service level that we're getting. If for myself, if the meter is high, then obviously we need more officers to address some of the issues. If it's low, then we have adequate or enough. So where are we in terms of the crime severity index?
And I haven't seen that this year. I could, again, look into that to see where they're at with assessing that. And I know that Stony Plain was doing fairly well in other years, but I'll get a hold of, again, through Carl, I'll get a hold of K-Division, the people that do provide me with the statistics and ask them where they're, because typically they provide an annual report on that. And I'm just trying to remember what month that typically comes out. But in between times, they can usually provide us with an idea as well.
Sure, and appreciate that. Thank you very much. See no more hands up. Definitely thank you for your time, and definitely appreciate the work that the RCMP has done in our communities to make sure that we're safe and we're well looked after. So personally, I feel safe knowing that the RCMP is on duty here. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Members of council, moving on our agenda is number 5, which is business items, which is a utility self-sustaining model. Okay, go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will ask our General Manager of Corporate Services to speak to this matter.
Thank you, Town Manager and Your Worship. So tonight we're here to present the third strategy in the fiscal sustainability framework, the utility self-sustaining strategy. So as you know, the town has 4 utilities currently that are under this model, which are the water, wastewater, solid waste, and the newest form, storm. So really, the town has done a lot of heavy lifting, and this council in particular last year in implementing the new storm utility, which sets us up into the future to keep the utilities separate from the tax base. As you can see in the document tonight, the principles around this strategy are sustainability, so that the utility services and the infrastructure to maintain that today and into the future are funded through the utility user rate model, as well as flexibility and minimizing vulnerability. So making sure that we have flexibility, so tax-based funds those parts of the operations, whereas the utilities are collected for those purposes and fund that infrastructure as well as the services under those, which just makes sure that the infrastructure and those important utilities, water being, high on residents, they don't realize until something happens to water how important that utility is, that those are funded long-term and that infrastructure is maintained around those. And then just the final principle would be equitability, that those benefiting from those services pay for them. So that one I think, makes sense. The storm was definitely a bit of an education, an ongoing education around what exactly storm infrastructure is and what that does for people's properties, whereas the water and the wastewater and the waste come a little bit easier to residents. So I think the other piece to this is just all the work that the Planning and Infrastructure Group has done around the master plans of understanding the state of our infrastructure, so that we on the finance side can build that into the rate models so that we are collecting appropriate dollars under those rates so that those future infrastructures can be funded under that. So I think that, a lot of work has been done in the past and that continues into the future. As you see, we've also identified some of the future areas that we think about as more on the finance side, is just getting really clear around the policies related to the utilities. So currently, our reserve policies and our debt policies do speak to the utilities separately. There's probably some further work. We've seen some good examples of just being really transparent around, the return that we get on those utilities, as well as defining exactly how much that we do put into the reserves to fund that future infrastructure. So just getting a little bit cleaner on the transparency on that and the reporting, so that everybody understands that piece as well. So that's sort of on our future work to do around that. And finally, this will just form part of the overall fiscal sustainability strategy. So the page 13 will form part of that larger document. So both the public, council, and administration keeps that top of mind, as this is how we fund utilities, this is why we fund utilities this way, so they're kept separate, so that they don't have to be put up to decide, do you want a rec center, do you want infrastructure? That rate model just funds that infrastructure, and it just kind of runs behind the scene, and that should and does, I think, make sense to residents. That's really all I had for you tonight, but I'm definitely here to answer any questions that you may have around this strategy.
Okay. Thank you very much for the update on the utilities strategy. Again, this is kind of like you said, this is the third strategy in a whole list of policies that will be brought back for council to adopt as a package. Members of council, any questions of clarity and understanding for the general manager? Go ahead, Councillor Matties.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have one question with regards to, so on page 11, where it describes the water, wastewater, and waste management fees, utility user charges are levied under the full cost utility rate model designed to cover current direct and indirect costs, as well as providing a return on investment. And then, of course, that the utility is a self-funding model. I want to kind of go back to, for example, water, where we're using a variable rate. How do you set that variable rate? Is it kind of more like to determine an average rate, so that in good years we'll put more money away, and in years, in years where people are using less, we'll put more money away? And is that working to achieve the goal of ensuring that we have enough funding for infrastructure moving forward?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Matties. So I would say we're still learning with the variable rate a little bit. So this will be the second year that we've moved to the fully variable. It definitely adds a little bit more complexity, or just understanding estimates and understanding the usage within the town. So we had the first year a very wet year, so that definitely played into it. So I would say this year, looking better, understanding that better to understand the long-term impacts on that. So I think it's a good question. I think we're monitoring closely to understand that and make sure that it's not too variable, or, do we need to look at this and look longer term and understand the impact of that? So I think it's something to definitely watch and continue to understand around that variable piece.
Your Worship, I'll maybe just add a bit further comment to that. And I was just in a discussion with the general manager leading into this particular report. We have been under that model for a rather short time, but and I don't recall if we put a specific review date, but I mean 4 or 5 year full review analysis would probably be in order for everybody. Both at council and administration, just to understand further. How is it working? How is it not working? Again, as the general manager mentioned, a year or two in, we can only say so much. 5 years in, we would have a pretty good, I believe, understanding as to our ability to utilize it, analyze it, forecast it, so on and so forth.
If I just may make a follow-up comment. The reason is that when this was first brought to us, I had read, it was a report that was completed, and I believe is the Government of Canada. I can't remember what department it was, but the results of it basically said, for to have a combined rate, a fixed rate plus a variable rate, ensuring that your infrastructure was covered over the long term, to make sure your needs were met. So just a thought again. I'm fully supportive if this works, But if this is a problem where we can't ensure that we're able to cover fixed costs without having significant fluctuations for our taxpayers, then I really would like to have, further data and information so that decisions can be made on that basis.
Okay. I thank Councilor Matthews. Any other questions of clarity and understanding? No. No, see, none. Thank you very much for that presentation, and it's good to kind of, I think you nailed it on the head, just to show how these utility models are self-sustaining, how it's going to be used year after year to create revenue and generate reserves to replace infrastructure projects. A lot of people don't understand the infrastructure projects. They just want to make sure that when they turn on the tap, the water runs. When they flush the toilet, the water goes away. When it rains, they don't get flooded. When the garbage bins are full, it's supposed to be picked up every 2 weeks. They get picked up. And I think that's a good strategy here, is to, again, to educate our residents of why these models are here and how they're used to make sure that those services are always met and kept up. So thank you very much. Okay, moving on to information items and council discussions. I know this is G&P council member, so we'll see if we can keep that fairly succinct. Oh, do you need a motion? Okay, let me go back to my agenda.
Unless you were so fast, I missed it, but.
Okay, so let me go back to my agenda here. Okay, so Councilor Marr, go ahead.
Thank you. I move that we accept the item for information.
Okay.
And that item, do you need the name?
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for the presentation. So any other questions on that motion? It is for information. Call the question. All in favor? Okay, thank you. My apologies, council members. I'm looking at the agenda. It was short, so I'm going to try and move it on. So any information for council to be aware of, council discussion that you want to bring up, and maybe some questions to maybe ask administrative staff so that they can report back to us. Councilor Bennett, Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
I have nothing at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I think you asked Inspector Loken everything that you had.
I did, yes, I did.
Councilor Meyer?
Well, actually, Councillor Bennett actually asked all of my questions to Inspector Loken as well, and I don't have anything this week either.
Thank you. Councilor Pletchko?
Nothing to add.
Thank you. Councilor Loy?
Yeah, I'd be out of line if I had 20 items. I have nothing.
I was surprised that you remembered 20 in a row. Councilor Matthews?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a couple of questions. Number one, a resident had contacted me with regards to residential street parking in West Era and some of the challenges with the school. And then he sent an email back and he said, well, there's going to be a no parking signs put up in that area. But then he said, is it possible to have residential parking stickers or some kind of a something that you can hang over your mirror in your vehicle, so if a resident needs to park or a visitor of the resident could park there? Do we do that, or have we considered that at all in our community?
I think that was in West Terra, down by the little park, just off Golf Course Road to the south before the school. I think we sent a letter back to the residents regarding that we're putting a no parking or limited parking in that area. How is that going? And obviously, as Councillor Matthews has asked, is there different alternatives? Have we started that with school starting?
Yeah, Your Worship, I can provide a bit of background, and then perhaps the general manager will need to add a few things as well. But so. Yeah, I mean, there's been ongoing concerns and challenges with some parking near our local high school. We've dealt with it on and off for a few years now, at least. And ultimately this year, feel that it's to a point where we would need to do some parking restrictions in that specific area. The parking restrictions, I believe, were a time restriction to match generally the school day. And that does bring up the question of, I mean, what about residents who live there and, I mean, they're visitors, so to speak, that may be coming to their home for various reasons and so on and so forth. So what I can inform council of, I know staff are looking at that. There'll be a decision made fairly shortly as to how we'll work on the initial phase of implementation of that. In my understanding, Stony Plain has history with sort of residential parking passes going back to Memorial when it was located in on the west end of the community. And some of the local area did have residential parking passes, so to speak, to just allow them to be able to park as needed, in front of their homes and so on for their residents and their visitors and so on, while still being able to, if need be, target high school students parking off-site. So again, administration is looking at that. There is that option. I would defer to our two general managers are getting together on that, and they'll work it through and come up with a solution that certainly will be implemented and to a degree tried and see if it works and see if it doesn't work, so on and so forth. I think I'll stop there, Your Worship. Not sure if the general manager wants to add anything. He's saying no. That's where we're at on that one, and we would expect that to take place reasonably in the next couple of weeks, I believe.
I just have one other question. Thank you, Your Worship. With regards to the large pickup pickup from September 19th to 20th, when will we know what items are accepted?
Your Worship, I'm not aware of that off the top of my head unless another member of the staff has a little bit further to add. I'm not seeing anyone. So I think, Your Worship, we can try to provide a bit further clarification on that shortly to council, but I would also believe that we'll be putting stuff out publicly in communication in advance of that as well.
Thank you. And I just have one other really quick item, which is I went to this play Across the Meridian, and it was at the Perk Stage in Stony Plain. Excellent presentation. There was 50 people in the room. We were all, at least 6 meters apart. But I highly recommend it in the community. They did a great job, and look forward to going to these in the future. So,
Thank you. Moving on to Councillor Laurie, anything to add?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. And I don't have much either. Again, just FYI for members of council, the large item drop-off is happening September, I believe, and it's actually very nice because it's kind of good that we missed. It was sad that we missed the large item drop-off in treasure hunt this year because of COVID-19. It was good to see that we're having large item drop-off to make up some of that ability to drop off and have a residence get rid of some of the large items. And I think the email said that everything that we collected before that was allowed is still allowed. So if we can get that messaging out quickly, that'd be awesome. And then just wanted to thank our staff for doing a great job and having a safe relaunch of our facilities and offices. It is difficult last 6 months as we dealt with COVID-19. I think our staff has done a good job to ensure the safety of our residents, and our staff are our #1 priority in our community, so thank you very much for doing that. And I look forward to us continuing to meet in person and making sure that we keep the numbers low by practicing proper hygiene, washing your hand, sanitizing, and stay home if you're ill. And members of council, again, this council is a job, and it's a great job that we love, but if you're feeling ill, don't come in, please. With that, it's adjourned.